Hey, what's up, guys? We're having a conversation on the subreddit about static X-rays versus digital motion X-rays because the majority of people in the world don't have access to DMX, digital motion X-ray, and so they're stuck doing static stuff. And I just wanted to kind of compare my static to my digital motion X-rays because it's not quite scientific, but they weren't super far apart, and I did have one treatment between them. But I thought it would be interesting to compare those two things, and it's not scientific at all. And also, I'm not a doctor or a radiologist or a chiropractor or any of these things, so not medical advice. And talk to your doctor because nobody online can tell you what scan to get. But a lot of people in Europe have to get those static X-rays, and if you don't know the difference between those two, so digital motion X-ray, if you think about a video, it's really just a bunch of pictures taken and put together and played one by one by one by one, fast enough to where your brain kind of thinks that it's something moving, but it's really just a bunch of images. And that's what digital motion X-ray is too. So they'll have you move and take a bunch of X-rays within that movement and play them one by one, and it turns into sort of an X-ray video, and that's DMX. Whereas static X-rays, instead of having you move and take a bunch of these X-rays throughout that motion, the doctor will go, okay, bend off to the right, take a snapshot, bend off to the left, take a snapshot, do this, do that, and take maybe 10 to 15 X-rays or so. And DMX is that movement, bunch of X-rays at once. So in the early days, these are two sets of early scans that we're going to compare. The first thing I did was static X-rays because I'd never heard of digital motion X-ray. I was really new to CCI at this time, and I would do a clinic that just did static X-rays. They did the latter that I said, where they just take single snapshots and they put them into a report and give you some instability measurements and all that stuff. Um, that told me a lot, and I, on average, the DMX ranges were 50 to 100% worse. But the static X-rays at least were on the right track. They at least told me basically what parts were busted up, but didn't tell me the degree. So, your mileage may vary, and you'd want to talk to a doctor about what scan you'd want to do again. But yeah, anyways, let's dig into these two. So, a couple things to just kind of mention. So, I had these static X-rays done in late July of 2023, and I was really messed up. I had been in a hard neck brace for a while, and really severely bedridden for maybe 6, 7 months of this time. Hadn't moved, and hard neck brace just hadn't moved at all. Laying and staring at the ceiling for quite a long time. Um, got these. It showed instability with that static X-ray. I had PRP done from C2 to C7 at Michigan Regenerative Medicine. Dr. Santa Ana is a really awesome guy, great clinic. And then I learned about DMX. So I had the PRP done, I think about August, maybe about a month after this. The PRP done in August, and then I had the DMX done about 5 months later in November. So again, not quite scientific, and there's several variables in there. Also, I was moving more at this point, walking a bit, maybe 5, 10 minutes, and occasionally picking up the 5 pound dumbbells and trying to do a thing or two at the gym, but not much. Also, during this static X-ray in the early days, you know, a lot of the stuff appears not scientific. It's kind of best guess based on symptoms and other things. But I don't remember. It's been over 2 years, which is crazy to think about. But I don't think I was moving as much during the static X-rays. I remember being barely able to stand. I had to hold a cane during these X-rays, and the doctor was very concerned, and I was too. I felt the ground shaking, and yeah, bad day, terrible day, to be honest. So I don't think I was moving nearly as much. And during the DMX, they forced me to move more. So a couple things. It's tricky. Additionally, I've asked some chiropractors what the difference could be between static X-rays and digital motion X-rays, and the explanation that they gave me kind of makes sense. And that's you have several muscles attached to your um, spine, to each vertebra. For instance, your levator scap is attached directly to C1, C2, C3, and C4 here. And you have multifidi here. You have several other muscles that are attached directly to the atlas and axis and all these others. And the explanation that I was given was when you move like this in kind of a pretty quick split second or so, I think that those muscles are going to try to attempt to stabilize things and put it back where it should be. Um, And if you do those static X-rays, you move and then that stabilization happens and then they take that snapshot. Whereas digital motion X-ray, because we're taking that video, they can do this, and before that happens, they can freeze frame and get kind of the worst of the worst of that instability. And the way these things are, the gist of it is if the vertebrae are moving off of each other, they have certain ranges that they can move that might be normal. But if you go too much off of that, let's say like 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters, depending on which level and what which part of the spine we're talking about. If it goes too far off of that in that worst moment, that would be considered instability, and that's cervical instability being the cervical spine. So that's the kind of theory that I was told, and I think that that makes sense. That's a good use case for DMX, but not everybody has access to this. And again, not scientific, but I thought it'd be interesting to compare what those static X-rays looked like compared to that digital motion X-ray, one treatment and several months later. So one more thing to mention, two more things to mention actually. So with these reports, when they take the X-ray scans and then they do this thing that it's called digitizing, where they take those images, put them into this software that will then give you all those measurements that I discussed that we're going to run through here today. How far is C1 moving off C2 in which direction, and when you do this and that and all this. This would be digitizing. They put them into these reports, and there seem to be a couple of brands of software to get this done. One, if you have a report from a DMX, you may recognize sort of the branding, what this looks like. You can recognize it with this like yellow highlight stuff here, and also these illustrations with this like blue background. This brand of report, I believe, is made by the Digital Motion X-ray manufacturer, and I don't think this is preferred by the doctors, but don't quote me on that. It If you get this one, you get less pages and less info. It kind of feels more like a general report. Whereas the other brand is Posture. It's like a third-party company that will do a lot more measurement. So you get like each level is measured with degrees and normal limits and how far you are off on that. And we'll run through that in just a second. Um, I had the DMX done and they gave me this report. I took my film, the MP4 file, the video of my DMX, and I sent that to Dr. Evan Katz, the chiropractor in Colorado that I interviewed on the YouTube channel. And he was able to digitize that for me in Posture Ray. And I think a variety of chiropractors and doctors have access to Posture Ray. So up to you what you do. Again, talk to the doctor. But if you go with Posture Ray, I think you get a lot more info. And for me, it was worth it. I think it was like $300-400, something like that. Maybe a couple extra $100 if you want to sit down and have a consultation with him. Don't quote me on any of that. But yeah, so let's run through this. So again, late July 2023, static X-rays are on the left, and I didn't move as much. I was in a very terrible state at this point. And then the digital motion X-ray about 5 months later, and one PRP treatment done between these two. So static DMX. And first off, it starts off with a curve. So red line is where mine was, and green is the healthy curve. And you can see that on both. Just move this panel. So they give you the first measurements. How far off is your curve? And a lot of these, again, it's more info than you probably need. But sort of the money shot here for curve is ARA C2 to C7. That's how good the curve is or how bad the curve is. They say the average range is -20 to -42, and the ideal is -42. So this would be 0 straight up. More curve and more curve would be more negative away from 0. So this would be, -42, -30, -20, 10, 0. And you want to be closer to that -42 according to these reports. -20, -42 is good. Static showed -24.5, and the DMX showed -31.3, which so this was better after that C2 to C7, which kind of makes sense because this is the area that we targeted with PRP. So hopefully that meant that these things were kind of the Jacob's ladder, if you will, was a little bit tighter, 25% or so off of the normal range, and almost half, almost 50% off the normal range in the static X-rays. Some other interesting measurements were here. So atlantodental interspace, that one was interesting because on here it was within normal limits. It was supposed to be less than 3 millimeters, and it was 1.8. And on the DMX, it showed 4.6, which is 1.6 millimeters away from the normal limits. And if you don't know what atlantodental interspace is, I'll just give you a really quick anatomy. So you may have heard it called ADI, as it's abbreviated. So here is C1, the atlas. Here is C2, or the axis. And here's kind of a top shot. So C2 is on the bottom here, and C2 has this peg that sort of sticks straight up, and C1 is like a ring that sits around it. It's kind of like this. And this yellow band right here is your transverse ligament that's in the front. This would be, your mouth is kind of up here. This is the back of your spine. This Dr. Centeno, I think, coined the term, or at least he uses it, and I think it's perfect. It's a seat belt for the dens. So it makes sure that this dens, which is part of C2, is mashed up up against the atlas here. And if this becomes, damaged or is not doing its job for whatever reason, then that dens, which should be kind of mashed up here, up against that atlas. If it's not, if its seatbelt starts to loosen up, then that can spread apart from the atlas, and this space right here opens up, and that is an increased atlantodental interspace, meaning that seatbelt is not holding it there, and this space right here starts to widen up, and that's not a good thing, because the spinal cord sits, right in this center area. So increased ADI is not good, but it showed weirdly enough that it was within normal limits on the bad day on the static X-ray, and then DMX showed increased ADI, and which means that seatbelt might have been not doing its job. And then we do flexion extension. So green is obviously good, red is bad. And yeah, again, like I was passing out. I barely survived. Yeah, terrible, worst week of my life, I think. Easy. So I wonder how much I actually was able to move or seizing up. Things were seizing up, which is dysfunctional. But interestingly enough, it showed more green and less red. And on DMX, it showed more red and less green. Don't know what's up with that. Um, and the nice thing about posture rate too is that a lot of the times it highlights in red, not all the time. As you can see with the transverse ligament laxity, this wasn't highlighted in red for whatever reason. But anyways, a lot of times it does, and this shows me which levels it was off, and more red, bad, less red, good, all that. And then onto the next page. Can be difficult too is that each clinic, sometimes they shuffle the pages around differently and even do different scans, and you'll see that. But the next important page, I think, is the neutral values. So just standing here in your normal position, how far is your head off in different directions without adding any movement or not yet? And this showed pretty much within normal limits. And then this one showed C1, C2 overhang, meaning C1 Atlas, C1 Atlas, C2 axis. One is sliding off the other, or it's overhang. This one showed my head was like kind of not in the right spot. Possible instability, and they show this image a little bit differently. But this one, yeah, red's not good. It's a little bit off, but according to the scans, pretty much within normal limits. And then this one, a lot less clear of an image, but according to the numbers, this one was much further off in that normal position. And then sort of the money shot here, I think, that most people are concerned with is the C1, C2 overhang. And this is when you bend off to the left or the right, and how far is C1 sliding off C2. And the theory is that that is your alar ligament that holds those things together. So if that C1, C2 overhang happens, and that could be damage to that ligament or other things as well. Green is where it should be, and red is obviously the not good area that it's going into. And you can't really see, but like here's here's C1. Here's the top of my mouth, and just behind you can see C1 and C2 here. And here's that dens I was talking about. Um, how far is that tip of C1 sliding off of C2? And that measurement of this space right here is what C1, C2 overhang is. So hopefully that's clear. Um, let's see what measurements they found. This was pretty interesting. So on the left bending, C1, C2 overhang, C1, C2 overhang was 4.5, but I don't think I could even really move without passing out again. So I'm sure it would have been much worse had I pushed further and done DMX. I'm really curious what this measurement would have been or could have been. So 4.5 is 1.5 above the normal limit of 3.0. And then on the DMX, it showed 6.7, which is 3.7 millimeters off that normal limits on the left. Um, and then 3.1 on the right, and 4.2 on the right on DMX. So, um, yeah, just off the top of my head math, probably not right, but and it's also not scientific, being that they were measured a little bit differently. But this showed, almost twice as bad in some categories than others, maybe 50% bad, as bad, or more, between 50 to 100% worse. And yeah, then the static X-ray place also took some other stuff that Central Illinois Spine, the DMX place, did not, which was like thoracic to cervical spine, and showed my head was like just kind of leaning off to the side. Um, some stuff on my hips that were uneven, so seems like my head was maybe off to the side and my body was like kind of trying to compensate for that in one way or the other, and things just weren't lined up. Um, this other place, the DMX place, did not take a lot of these measurements. So yeah, anyways, those are the scans, and I don't think it's going to tell you too much, um, but personally, the static helped. The static X-ray at least told me, like, okay, at least I'm probably chasing up the right thing. Because when I did this, I was kind of at the end of the rope here. I had several MRIs. I think I had 4 MRIs done, several ultrasound X-rays, chest scan, lung scan, several ER visits, about 1 billion blood tests, and I hate needles. About every analysis that I could think of, I would just come up with something in my head or research some random, I don't know, jungle disease or Lyme disease or something, and go to Quest Diagnostics and go get a blood test, drop another $100, or go to the ER when I think I'm having a stroke or whatever. And just no answers at all until I went and got static X-rays, and it wasn't perfect, as you can see, but it did at least tell me that things were not right, and maybe that was the problem. Um, so yeah, and another thing, uh, which is difficult, is again with DMX, you're doing a ton of X-rays. It's a bunch of X-rays strung together, which is a lot of radiation, and that's what is most people's fear. And even with static X-rays, the less radiation, the better in your life. If you can avoid it at all, that'd be perfect. It's not risk-free, so that makes it really tough to, like, if DMX was risk-free and it was free financially, I'd check it every day. I think we all would. We want to make sure we're progressing and take tons of data and stuff, but like you only get a couple shots at this, and that it sucks because every time you go for a shot of X-rays, you're adding more risk. So we need other measurements. And if you're a scientist or something and you're watching this, there's a huge hole there's a big gap in the market to make something. I don't even know what that would look like, but some other way to measure things, at least some of the hallmark CCI um, findings, like the curve, like the C1, C2 overhang, like these other measurements here, that doesn't require radiation. And again, I don't have an answer for that. There is flexion extension MRI, but that tends to be, I mean, it's flexion extension, it's not side bending, so you miss on that. Lateral bending value stuff, which doesn't tell you much about the alar ligament from what I understand, doesn't catch it a lot of the time, so it's tough. There are some, I don't know, I've done some research, if there was some sort of like digital ultrasound or other sort of proxy, or even some way to measure, I don't know, through some sensors or something, there's got to be something else out there. I've randomly come across stuff in my research like this, which they took ultrasound, which does not use ionizing radiation like X-ray does, um, and it's nothing. There's a half-baked thought, but like digital ultrasound or something like that. They put this ultrasound on pigs, and then I think they moved them, and then measured how those spinal segments looked through ultrasound. Don't know. there's got to be something, some other measurement by proxy that doesn't require X-ray. And also another difficulty is DMX. I think a machine costs maybe 50 grand or so or more, and it's illegal. So in a lot of places, so even if you order one and ship it to Canada or Europe or whatever, some places you might get in hot water for that. And if you do, if it breaks down or needs to be repaired, which happens, who's going to fly out and fix that? It's going to be really, really expensive. So puts us in kind of a tough spot diagnostic wise. All these factors. If you have CCI, you know this. None of this is news to you, but we need something else. So if you're smart, unlike me, if you are actually smart, then that would be great, and someone could work on this. And if you have any ideas, that there's got to be some other way to measure this, or at least some happy medium here that can give some sort of measurements by proxy. So hopefully this was helpful. I know I need to make more videos, but as of recently, I've been trying to get back to normal life and moving around and spending more time in the woods and with my family. And I've, excuse me, I've kind of obsessed with CCI for the last 2 or 3 years because how could you not? It's on my mind 24/7 all the time. So recently that hasn't been so bad. And try to undo some of the mental trauma that I've gone through, especially in the early days. I don't even like thinking about it, but yeah, especially when I did that first static X-ray scan, it was a terrible, terrible, terrible time. So trying to get back to that, but I'll get more videos. I need to get more rehab stuff going and other info on that stuff. So I'll get to it here soon. If you have any questions, just let me know. Hopefully this is helpful.